Hey, what's going on out there, YouTube family? This is Sammy Lager here representing Team JVS. I'm back here again for another movie review. This is a Hulu exclusive. I'm talking about the movie Palm Springs. There's been a lot of buzz around this film. A lot of people were like, yo, it's actually pretty cool. Yo, you should definitely go and check it out. And so I am happy to say their confirmation is correct. Like, it was actually very entertaining. Had a lot of different character depth moments. And it was just insanely hilarious a lot of the time. Like, it's not even on some, like, okay, this was stupid funny. Like, it was some dark humor. Like, some of the things that were happening, I was like, this is so dark. But then at the same exact time, like, it was a very unflinching, compromising situation when you're, you living the same exact day over and over again. And I know there's been movies that have done that. Of course, Groundhog's Day is probably the most notable. I think there was a birthday film, I forget the name of it, where this girl, like, every single time she was going over and over and over again. But they go and take this one to an extra mile because they add a bit of science fiction and added things to kind of make it, a little bit more grounded. One of the things I would say the most that I really enjoyed about this was definitely Andy Samberg as Nyles. Andy, for the good part of the first half of the film, like, I was like, yo, he is doing an amazing job. And it's weird because when I think about Andy, I think about, Brooklyn Nine-Nine or some other things where he's just kind of been like this really stupid, random character. But I was very much so invested already in Nyles as a character. I was like, he is very engaging, he is funny, he's got a lot of depth, but at the same time, he is very much so fundamentally flawed based on the circumstances he has in his past, but even more so in the circumstances he's in right now, because it's almost like an addiction. It's almost like he accepts his fate and he is going to just ride it out till the wheels fall off. And I think that one of the other things I love about the way that they do different characters is there's a lot of hidden mysteries to who they really are. Like, each character has their own backstory. Each person has their own, like, little specific things that adds to the volume of the movie as a whole, which I thought was very interesting. So then you had Cristin, I'm gonna get her last name wrong, I apologize. Milioti playing the role of Sarah, and she does an amazing job as well. I mean, not just the fact that she has very good chemistry with Andy, but she fleshes her character out pretty much. By the end of the movie, I was like, yo, you had an amazing story too, outside of the character, the role Nyles. Like, Sarah has very much so her own story, and it's a lot of messed up stuff, but it's even more so very interesting character depth for both characters specifically, because with Nyles, it was more so like he was in a circumstance. We don't know a lot about his backstory, but you're kind of like, where he's at, where he's stuck in, and he just accepts it. And she's kind of she's on the other side of that coin, but she also has a lot to her past that was very fascinating to kind of watch and dissect and see. Then you got, like, vets in this, which are very fascinating. You got Peter Gallagher and you got J.K. Simmons. J.K. Simmons plays the role of Roy, and, like, Roy is insane. Like, Roy, low-key, I was like, yo, this man, it might as well be the Terminator, because, like, I was kind of, like, pondering in my head, like, yo, what is Roy about to do next? And I don't want to spoil nothing about it, but he's definitely a scene stealer. But the even crazier thing is the fact that Andy is able to work in par with J.K. Simmons. It's not like, J.K. Simmons outshines him in every scene that he's in. Like, J.K. Simmons is a great addition to this story and a great addition to this cast. But Andy, to me, as well as, of course, his cohort that's in this, they don't lose a step. Like, they very much so are all the way in it, and they're all the way invested, which makes it so much more fun. Even when you go on, like, having random montages of them, like, dying or things happening, and you go to the transition to the days and just the randomness of what they're doing. But even more so, not just the exposition. There is a lot of flushed out dialogue. Like, the dialogue between what these characters have done and what they're doing and the interactions that they're actually having, the plot and the script is very well done. I think it's paced pretty well and pretty evenly, where it's like this movie is about an hour and a half, maybe an hour and 40 minutes, but it feels longer, but not in a bad way. You know what I mean? Like, it's not like, oh man, like this movie drug out. Like, no, like I was like, I'm in it all the way through. I was like engaged all the way to the very end, and that's kind of hard to do when you got like a science fiction comedy. And I haven't even given you guys kind of the synopsis for it, and I don't really want to. I think that this is something you should just experience for yourself, because the circumstances surrounding where Nyles and Siara are, as well as Roy, is the platform for what's happening. But you got like Peter Gallagher, Howard's playing the role of Sarah's dad, and then you also got Camila Mendes playing the role of Talia, who is Sarah's sister. Got Tyler Hoechlin in this one, Superman himself, or CW Superman himself. He has a very interesting role in this one, but again, every single character has at least a semblance of a backstory or like thing that kind of like makes them stand out. That's one thing I was saying about the scripting for this one. Everybody stands out, and a big part of that is the delivery that Andy, with his role of Nyles, and the role of Siara, played by Cristin, they deliver in spades based on their interaction or their, conversations about their interaction with these other people. And it just adds more volume and depth and comedy and intrigue for the actual film itself. Now, in terms of the violence in this one, be forewarned, there is quite a bit of violence. But they don't use a lot of gratuitous violence. It's not like, you see in decapitations and stuff. It's not that kind of horror-X film. But, they definitely leave up to imagination where certain circumstances are going to have. And even the way they describe it, I think it makes it even worse, because you're like, yo, I'm about to die like this. Like, oh my gosh, prepare yourself, And it's like the line of dialogue works so well because that adds dark humor. So it doesn't need a lot of gratuitous, graphic stuff. Even though there's things that are happening in the backfold, it's not needed. And I think that's even more of a feat in and of itself. So there's a lot of cursing. There's definitely a lot of it's not a lot of nudity, but it's definitely a lot of sexual and sensual moments throughout. And a lot of it is implied, but some of it is seen. So it definitely is not something for kids at all. I think that the scenery, the backdrop of where this is actually located, is a very interesting area because it kind of feels kind of dangerous. The only way I can kind of describe it for you is imagine, Bill and Ted Excellence Journey, or Bill and Ted 2, when Bill and Ted go and they go from their neighborhood and they just go randomly out to this location and that's where they die. It kind of feels like that. Like the area where they're actually at and where a lot of this is kind of shot, it kind of feels like that in the feelings of yo, man, something's going to happen. And also the science behind this is very intriguing because they definitely go out of their way to kind of describe, they don't oversaturate, what's happening. They leave a lot up to suggestion for you to understand or comprehend what you think it is, but they do add science and science fiction elements to kind of make it more believable or at least understandable what's actually kind of happening, which I thought that was the most interesting thing because when you think about Groundhog Day, it's I don't know how the heck this happened. This is magic, same other movies it's kind of similar to no, this is not a magic situation. So I think that was one thing that I thought that was very intriguing. As far as the film is concerned, I actually really loved it, man. It was actually really fun. I had a lot of fun with it. I would leave this at an 8.5, maybe at the lowest an 8 out of 10. I think you're gonna have a really fun time with it. And I think it's got a lot of heart behind it. And I think it definitely has a story to tell. And I think that you can't say that with a lot of horror / science fiction / comedy films nowadays, that it actually has a story to tell. Now, I think that the only critique that I might have is that towards the third act, there was a character motivation that happened with, I don't say who, but it kind of draws out a little bit longer than it should, and it kind of like hits at this really quick resolution or comprehension, which sometimes that can happen, you know, but that'd be the only real critique that I have, but I don't want to really spoil behind that. And not just that, in connection to one other character, I was kind of like, how? You did this, but what about this person? Like, how does this affect this person? I don't want to spoil it, but there's a specific person in this movie that when the movie ends, I was like, but what about them? Like, what happens with them? That's really all I can say. If you've seen the movie, you understand what I mean by that. But definitely go and check it out. Palm Springs is on Hulu right now, and I think it deserves your attention. I'll talk to you guys later. Make sure you like, subscribe, hit that bell button. Keep it locked. JVS, we ain't gonna stop. Have a blessed one, guys. Peace.